Hey, listeners, and welcome to the You Are Epic podcast. This is where we honour the people who've helped build not just our industry, but our communities. I'm Angela Hucker, and I am so glad that you're here. So, I'm taking the time to sit down with people who've been in construction for years, people who've been through the ups, the downs, and everything in between. You're going to hear real stories of resilience, growth, and moments that shaped who they are. This podcast is for those that want to learn more from people who've been walking this path for some time, and they're helping to lift up others and quietly making a difference along the way. It's also to show you that your journey matters and your voice matters. And in case you've forgotten, you are epic. Let's get into it. Today's guest is Craig Shaw, a strategic thinker and transformation leader with a diverse career across defence, government, and industry. From managing over $3 billion worth in Navy infrastructure to pioneering sustainability solutions on his own sheep farm, Craig brings a unique blend of systems thinking, pragmatism, and innovation. He's passionate about helping defence and the defence industry deliver capability faster, cheaper, and with less risk, all by challenging old paradigms and creating space for new thinking. So, thank you so much for joining us, Craig. It's an honour to have you here.
Pleasure, Angela, and hello to all your listeners.
Thank you. So, one thing I always, because I'm a very curious person, so I always get curious to know how do people get started in this industry? So, how did you get started, Craig?
Much by an accident of history. Although when I think back, I do have a bit of a family background in construction. One of my uncles was a builder, another one a joiner. But I was more academically inclined and pursued university degrees, and my goal was to be a vet. Didn't quite make that, and settled for a marine biologist. Um, but then I joined public service in the early noughties, and through my public service, uh, started in Department of Defence in infrastructure division after the first couple of years, anyway, and looked after their land planning and spatial information area. So really, it was looking after the master planning for defence, which for someone like me that's inherently curious and loves to be in the middle of everything, master planning was fantastic because I'm the type of person that if someone's got a question, ask Craig, because generally I'll either know, if not know the answer, then who to go and talk to. And I
Mm.
love that. So for 3 years, I ran master planning in defence in their infrastructure division, and then moved on to do a few other jobs around the public service. And then in 2015, was told that I was being slack and that I needed to put the uniform on and do some reserve service, um, going back into Navy infrastructure. So by the time we did all the paperwork, it was 2016, and that was, the start of a 20-month contract that lasted 8 years. Uh, yeah, so Navy in their wisdom or delusion, I'll leave that discussion to someone else. Um, Navy asked me to stay on after the initial 20 months and then offered me a full-time service position in 2019, I think it was, in the end. And then, yeah, that was kind of the start of my 7 years in infrastructure, in Navy infrastructure, and Navy was kind enough to send me off to do a master's for 12 months. So it's really kind of been, just an accident of history. It's something that I
Mm.
did, that I found an affinity for. As I said, being in the middle of everything kind of suited my curious nature, and built on it from there.
Now, $3 billion worth of Navy infrastructure, that's a fair chunk of infrastructure. So, what was that involved with?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate. Use one description of being the project officer and then deputy director for Navy Capability Infrastructure Sub-Program. So that was a $2.1 billion program of work.
Wow.
To support of infrastructure to support the introduction of, wait for it, the Arafura class OPV, the Hunter class frigate, and the Supply class AOR or auxiliary oiler replenishment ship. So by the time you take the infrastructure to support those three capabilities, yeah, it rolls up to a lazy $2.1 billion. We were building, infrastructure from Sydney, or in Sydney, Adelaide, Perth, Darwin, and Cairns. So I've got around the country a bit, which is kind of nice. And it also, it included a diverse range of infrastructure as well, from training centres, wharves, what I call technical buildings, so they were integration centres, accommodation, warehousing, a vast array of different things. And of course, being in infrastructure, all your stakeholders come from all the different fundamental inputs to capability. So again, I was in the centre of everything, which was my preferred place to be.
Yeah.
So when you take $2.1 billion in one program, the kind of three kind of rolls up pretty quickly. But it included HMAS Stirling redevelopment, Larrakia Barracks redevelopment, and a couple of other projects as well, around the $100-200 million mark.
Wow. Now, you mentioned like the actual type of ships, but in layman terms, for people who don't know what that is, what kind of length and width and depth were those ships that you were building the infrastructure for?
Sure. So the Arafura class is an 80-metre 4.1, 4.3. Can I be able to, it's been a couple of years. Can I be a little bit slack on that one? With a 12 or 13 metre beam. So it's the replacement for the Armidale class patrol boats, but a lot more capable. They were around the mid 40s, early 50 metre kind of in length. So the Arafura class is quite sizable again. Then the Hunter class frigate, which is 151 metres in length, 26 metres beam, 9.5 metres draft, and a lazy 10,500 tonnes displacement. So a sizable frigate, which were currently being built in Osborne, South Australia. And then, of course, we've got the Supply class AOR, which is a tanker, essentially a replenishment ship. Well, you're going to test me here. I think it's around 260 metres long. No, I won't guess at the beam, but about 19,000 tonnes displacement. So quite a large, for the Royal Australian Navy, a large ship. Not as large as the LHDs, but it was a lot of fun to play with. And being a replenishment ship, it has some different features. Bulk fuel handling, for instance. Stores, not just for its own use, but to replenish an actual task force. So the arrangements, how it's not just the ship at the wharf, but it's all the logistics that go along with it, which was fascinating to try to understand in terms of supporting that with infrastructure.
And it's like a whole nother ecosystem that helps support that as well.
Oh, indeed, yeah. And they all have their individual ways of doing things and paradigms. And the thing is, with Navy infrastructure, we're talking about large ships with quite prolonged design life. So, a frigate would have, a design life of somewhere between 15 and 25 years. I suppose design versus how long it actually might be in service for. So by the time you actually build it, you're looking out to 30 years ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm asking my stakeholders, what do they need to support their vessel out to 30 years? Because in defence infrastructure, we have it's a one-shot deal. At the very front of the project, we're expected to provide the infrastructure to take that capability through to end of life. Now, there's a little bit of plasticity in there, but essentially that's the same. Now, a lot of people don't think out to that length of time in, and certainly in defence, we're really good at covering off what's coming over the horizon. What's beyond the horizon, however, well, that's going to be someone else's problem. Yeah, not today, not for infrastructure. So we will look, our starting point was 30 years, but then we're doing 50-year design life for wharf upgrades.
Wow.
Or 100-year design life for new wharves. That was the basis of some interesting conversations about where people thought the fleet might go to in the future and how that fleet might be used. And from our discussion, you can tell that it's that forward thinking, that futures work is what really gets me excited and passionate, trying to give people the confidence to project forward, because the future's unknown and it can be a bit of a scary place. So how do you get people to be confident enough to make decisions and stick with them over a projected period of time, especially when those people may change in their roles? But that's another story.
Now, I know you've got a very interesting example of this where something was designed and then there was wanting to be some changes, and you've had to then go to your stakeholders and kind of question how deep their pockets might be. Would you like to share that one with us?
I'll share a little bit of detail. So it's certainly public knowledge that the Hunter class frigate, for instance, was originally going to be a replacement for the Anzac class. The Anzac class is 140 odd metres, 3,600 tonnes displacement. Happy to be wrong. And the draft, I think, is around the 4.5 metres. It might be as low as 7, but certainly fits within in our current port structure. So we were thinking, okay, well, it's a replacement. What are we looking at? Well, the replacement was going to be modelled on about the Hobart class destroyer, which is a 7,000-tonne, 140 odd metre long vessel. When Hunter went to government, it was 8,800 tonnes at 149 metres with a 7.6. Some of these figures are indelibly branded into my mind. 7.6 metre draft. Currently, that vessel sits, as I mentioned, at 10,500 tonnes, 9.5 metres. So that the ship got significantly larger and heavier. And when you're bringing ships up against wharves, they need to be strong enough to deal with the forces that are at play, and the water needs to be deep enough to take their draft. Increasing the draft and the length and the displacement of that vessel started to make some significant changes to what our assumed requirements were for our infrastructure. The interesting thing there is that our costs were established back in 2018 when that vessel was 8,800 tonnes, etc. So one of the things that certainly in defence ability projects, and then any large project suffers the same thing, is assumptions management, and that's something that animated me for a large number of months about how in defence, particularly in Navy capability projects, we could handle assumptions management and be able to then justify
Mm.
going back to the program sponsor, generally with our handout, to say, well, that 150 or 140 metre vessel that's going to 150, yeah, longer wharves, deeper berth pockets, etc.
Mm.
We're going to need some extra cash. So yeah, uh, it's an interesting place,
Mm.
and it's not something, in my experience, talking to designers, that those assumptions are not really well managed, in
Mm.
the sense that assumptions are generally dealt as deemed fact, as opposed to, no, they only assumptions, and those assumptions might change as we go through the design process.
Mm.
And yeah, that created a bit of heartburn and heartache through the development of that program.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because from having been involved in that and where that's kind of led you to the business that you've got now, if you'd like to share a little bit more about that and what you specialize in.
Yeah, and thanks very much for that, because it really did lead into that. And I suppose my career in the public service has largely been providing advice to decision makers to enable them to make decisions that are both robust, so good decisions, and resilient. They last through time.
Mm.
And I found that the tools that I had available, and the way that some of the work that in general, not just defence, but I think the public service in general, and I think I'd be correct in saying through corporate Australia as well, doesn't prepare decision makers
Mm.
well. And by that, what I mean is that when we look to the future, we try to predict the future. We try to put not just the line in the sand, but we actually try to put the stick, the point. This is what the future will be.
Yeah.
But there's nothing more sure that we'll be wrong. The future is unknowable. So it's not about what my conclusion was, is that it's not about predicting the future and trying to hit in my vernacular, trying to hit a fast moving small target, but making the future state large enough to hit.
Mm.
So what other the possible futures could be, and then what do those possible futures have in common, and that's what we aim to hit.
Mm.
And as we get closer and more detail emerges, then we can move left and right of arc, but we're at least heading in the right direction.
Mm.
So what I'm doing as far as my consultancy business is developing a foresighting process to help people, businesses, organisations look to the future, not with the trying to be right in mind, but
Mm.
actually just being comfortable with being less wrong, and trying to describe what a future may be. Once we do that, we can build up a narrative, and then that narrative can be used for several things, as that be used as the basis for projects that we develop
Mm.
in the direction that we're going to take it. But it also can be used to defend against the naysayers, the change of personnel, the good ideas fairy, because we all deal with those, right? Oh, wouldn't it be good if? Yeah, it would have been good if 6 months ago or 18 months ago when the project was in development. Right now, it's just a pain in the hiney. But the good ideas vary. And also to take to not only senior managers, but to government, a narrative that they can stick to, that's actually got more legs in it than just the news cycle or an election cycle. There is something inherently valuable about, yes, we've come together. This is the direction we're going to take. But in saying that, we also have to have the guardrails. Again, coming from defence, indicators and warnings, that if the development that we're looking for, and if it's in high tech, we all know that high technology can go faster than what we anticipate, or indeed slower. So those indicators and warnings are there to enable us to check our progress, or the progress of progress, to see how we're tracking, to see whether we need to indeed revisit our narrative, to revisit the foresighting, to say, well, circumstances have changed and we need to move left, move right, up, down, as the case may be, because we have more information available. But at least we've got the strong narrative and a story as to why we do that. It's not just because an interest group has been pounding the table. We actually have a strong story and a good reason to change. So that's the thrust of where I'm taking. That's very much at the front end, and then designing the programs and projects around that to help organisations actually prepare or even deliver that future that they've envisaged through the foresighting process.
So you touched on something really important there with government, because obviously a lot of work that is out in the industry, like government is the number one client because they fund a lot of work. And when you think about, like defense infrastructure with the space that, you've come from as well, that's all government funded. How can, because we're at a real crossroads at the moment with projects and things like that. What can government do to be able to have that foresight and not be thinking of an election term and only being in there, but actually having that foresight to plan things out so that, from a long-term strategy perspective, it is something that is sustainable as well?
It's a really good question. And I think it's something that we as a society have struggled with, because what is it that's, to turn it around, what is it that's stopping us from doing that? What's stopping our leaders from making those long-term visionary decisions? Well, I would say fear of being wrong, fear of not having an argument or a justification or reasoning or rationalization to support the decision that they've made. So two things. We don't engage with the processes that would give us that robust narrative. And so, we're very good at forecasting, looking to the past, to history, to try to predict the future. And for some things, that's fair. Certainly what we've seen in the likes of Ukraine and the US, Gaza, our history in human society is replete with examples that could be drawn on to understand how those situations have emerged. But that's limited. When we talk about high technology, for instance, biomedical advances, these things are greenfield. They are new. They are cutting edge. History is not going to be a predictor of the future. Now, when we talk about the hockey stick of development, well, when things are nice and linear, forecasting's easy. But once you start to get to that exponential growth in development or advancement, a few percent off means that you are way, way off. So we need a different tool. I would argue that foresighting at least provides the best tool that I've come across to to date. But what that could create is that narrative that would enable even the politicians on a 3-year or a 4-year election cycle actually be able to have a narrative that would bring people together. Because that narrative in itself is from having brought people together. So they're really just using that as a tool and reminding people of that vision to hold people's focus. So I think sort of that way we would assist politicians get out of that rapid cycle of the 24 hours or the 3 weeks. The saying, a week can be a long time in politics. Yeah, but it doesn't have to be. The other thing it does is that it means that the narrative within society gives us something around which to have a rational discussion and against that narrative, perhaps the more left and right extreme. So the word I was looking for, the more extreme views are seen to be more extreme. And I think it would just help the conversation, and then perhaps allow people to shine a little bit of light on their own, on themselves, and reflect about where they sit in terms of societal norms or accepted behaviours. I think I would be straying in that direction. There we go.
Here we
it's
go.
Kind of, I think coming from a science background, certainly, that more cognitive, less emotive, reactionary thing is something that is very close to my core. And I think that we need to inject that a little bit more, or reintroduce it, perhaps as a better description, into public discourse.
I think a lot of people personally get a little bit lost upon the way, and then they get caught up with conforming and hierarchy and different things like that as well. And it's, what's your sort of ideas about that, with, how that kind of mindset, I guess it is, of how that could be shifted a little bit?
Really good point. And certainly coming from a military background, even academic background, sort of the academic glass ceiling, the hierarchy within the military, certainly is alive and well. I think certainly what I've seen within the Australian Defence Force, the expectation from personnel from non-commissioned ranks to commissioned ranks is to be more thoughtful. The adage that we've grown from of, when I tell you to jump, the only question I want to hear is how high. Is not there. And certainly if I harken back to my own officer training back in the early 90s, one of my instructors was very forthright in saying that, you have grey matter between your ears. It is your duty, and he emphasised your duty to exercise that. And if you have an opinion, you are duty bound to hold that opinion until such time as you are giving instruction otherwise. In other words, a decision is made. Now, within a military organisation, you can understand that. Happy with that. But until the decision's made, you hold to your guns. You hold your argument. And I think, whether it be military, and we see this in if you ever watched Air Crash Investigator, pilot and co-pilot, different cultural norms are at play. That there are many of those accidents are caused by the holding to hierarchy, but when the senior member is in error. And I think as a military officer, but also as a scientist, or something that came through in my era of science, that we are duty bound. If we have knowledge, then we are duty bound to share it with the public. We
Mm.
are duty bound to share our knowledge for the betterment of human society, because, well, our tertiary institutions are supported by government, which,
Mm.
is supported by our taxes.
Taxpayers.
So, yeah, so we are duty bound. For me, at least twofold.
Mm.
To share that knowledge, argue the case, and try to better society's position. Without even going to my own personal views about making people feel better about the small amount of time that I share with them. I feel an obligation
Mm.
for the benefits that I've been given by Australia, essentially.
Mm. No, I love that. And it's to me it's part of that of I call it being a good steward. Like part of being a good steward is that you're here to actually help share knowledge. You're not here to withhold it. Because how can you actually help others if you're holding things that may be beneficial and help support them? So that's part of being a good steward. So what I'd love to
Absolutely.
hear is, you got a lot of passion in this space with with what you do in your consulting business. Where does that come from, and what kind of drives you with that?
At risk of being wrong, or at least perhaps overly dramatic, I think I've got a perhaps a little bit glib, overdeveloped sense of duty, or in terms of the military service. Uh, my mum was a nurse, so was very, a nurse, was an instructor for St John's Ambulance, member of the local sports clubs. She was very giving,
Mm.
and I joined the Royal Australian Navy in 1989, when I was at uni, and kept my reserve service going until I went full time for the first time in my life, age 52.
Wow.
I still wonder about the whether both Navy and myself knew what we were doing at that point. But anyway, nonetheless, uh, and then had um, those years of full time service before again going back to the reserve. So that service value is something that's quite core,
Mm.
um, to me. Um, and I think that's been a big driver in my life. Wanting to help people, um, provide service, and
Mm.
circumstances where at the time, I flirted with the idea of whether I was going to join the military or the police force, and in the end, I stuck to my guns and continued on trying to be a vet. And that comes down to a philosophy of goal setting, which I still hold to. But
Mm.
I didn't reach that heady goal. But I tell you what, it's been a great run nonetheless.
And it's led you to where you are now, which is awesome. So if you had a magic wand where you could, fix some things, what would you fix in this space? What would you like it to look like in the future moving forward?
If I could fix anything, it'd be about us, about about us as the human animal. We are so focused on what is different about people rather than what is the same, and you know how we can be come from different sides of this great world that we live on, and yet still share so many things. But we focus on the differences,
Hmm.
and whether that be our gender, whether it be our ability, disability, continuum. Um, whether it be our intellect, whether it be, whether we're left or right-handed, can't trust cack-handers. Says he with 3 left-handed children with both parents being right. Try and work that one out. It's just, folks, relax, chill out, take a chill pill, like celebrate. How boring would this world be if we were all the same?
Exactly. Yeah.
Celebrate the differences, for goodness sakes. And quite frankly, what is normal? We're all a little bit weird in one way or another. So, pull the proverbial out of your backside and kind of, open your eyes and chill out. I think, people might say, oh, world peace or whatever. I think if we just relaxed a little bit and was more content with our lot in life, in of ourselves. I don't begrudge people ambition, but you can achieve things by treading on people. It's just kind of a little bit off, but you might recall there was some motivational pictures or memes of someone climbing the corporate ladder and treading on people's heads to climb the ladder. Take that picture with a passion. I'm more of the ilk of I'd like to achieve things because I help other people achieve. So you're being pushed up, as a leader, being pushed up by the people that you're helping graphically below you, but with you. If we just chilled out a little bit, if we weren't so greedy, I think, looking across at our friends and colleagues in the US, I think we're seeing some of the best and worst of what human society can provide, and a lot of that's about the focus on self, and really take the focus off yourself and celebrate others, and how you can help others, I think would be a great change. And for me, it's definitely celebrate who people are, not some perverse impression that what we should think they are.
And it's all about, the world is very good at division, but let's try unity for a change.
Yeah. I mean, we love pigeonhole, don't we? People in boxes. That helps us understand. That it is how we understand a very complex world. It's the next step that I have a problem with. The next step being, oh, well, I'm better than them, or they're better than someone else. No, you don't have to take the next step. In just, understand them as much as we can understand another person, and celebrate that for themselves. If they're good at numbers, if they're good at words, if they're good with their hands, if they're good with people, how fantastic. And the other thing is, people are good at something. If they're good at getting out on their own and living in the middle of the bush, what a great skill. And what contribution can they give society? Well, an appreciation of the natural environment be far greater than people that might be living in the middle of New York or Tokyo or Mexico City, or pick a large metropolis. So I think it's I don't have a problem with pigeonholes. It's what people do with them and how that again the imposition of that hierarchy. And
Mm.
coming from a biology background, I also and I actually say that we are a fascinating animal. Civilization is a very thin veneer over the top. You breach that veneer and we regress very rapidly and
Mm.
quite deeply, um, with riots, war, those things. So let's work on thickening that veneer,
Yeah.
um, and supporting that, I think. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. And, that's, something that I'm very passionate about is, helping people and supporting and lifting others up. And, it's not a me thing, it's a we thing. And, I can't do things on my own. None of us can do things on our own. We need each other to help survive in this world. And, it's a tough world and there's a lot to deal with. So we're better when we're united rather than divided. So, no, great insights there. And thank you for sharing. So, in closing, Craig, what I'd love to ask you is if you had just, I mean, that's just awesome what you've said there, and you may want to say it again, but when I ask you this next question, but if you've had the opportunity to have anyone stand in front of you, and there was one bit of advice that you could give them, and you've gone, if ever I could say this to someone, it would be this, like just to help them with their life or their career or whatever it may be, what would Craig's words of wisdom be?
That is really hard. I'll try to be quick. Um, the reason being is that some of the names of people that I'd like to be standing in front of are quite wide and varied. To give you an example, uh, and we're pretty much talking about extremes here. One might be Donald Trump, and the other would be not necessarily a person, but a small group of people, my children, left and right of arc of what I would tell them. Let me tell you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but let's hold to the positive for a moment. To my kids or to any adolescent, any child really that's in their formative years, and perhaps I'm being a little bit greedy here, wanting to impact those more than others. But really, anyone that is we talked about mindset earlier, that is an open mindset. And I mentioned it in passing earlier, and it's about goal setting. I had the absolute pleasure of having a single mum that told me I could do anything that I put my mind to and that worked towards. And I would say that, and you can tell this is emotional,
Mm,
that I would tell kids today, aim high, dream big.
mm,
It doesn't matter whether you're hit or miss, but endeavor. Because if you try and your goal is high, but you miss, it will be so much better than if you aim low and hit.
mm.
And the second part is, about goal setting. Even when you do hit goals, in sport, you set a goal, you hit it, you reset your goal. You hit it, you reset your goal. It's how improvement occurs.
Yeah.
Hit or miss, it doesn't matter. Reset your goal. And that's the great thing, it's not set in concrete. It's more of a clay tablet, and you're going to rewrite it.
Mm,
And so dream big, be positive, but then act.
mm.
Um, yeah, that so to my kids, that's what I'd say. To all of adolescents, um, dream big and go for it, because you never know what you can achieve.
I think your words, regardless of your age, applies to anyone, to be honest, because, everyone's got stuff they're trying to do. And if you can remove that small mind that hold you back, or, like you touched on fear before, or those thoughts or things like that, and just keep going. Hey, look, I'm just going to keep aiming, keep aiming, keep aiming. And if I miss, that's okay. I might learn something along the way, but at least I know I've got something I'm aiming for. So it definitely applies to everyone, not just kids, not just adolescents, of all ages, because, adults need this kind of advice as well. So,
Uh, and the other half of that, if I can, don't listen to the committee called they. Right? Um, I wanted to do drama. I wanted to do choir when I was at school, but they wouldn't like it. They would tease me.
mm,
They would. The committee called they, um, I think, is responsible for a great deal of harm, and holding people back from what they would like to do.
mm,
And yeah, so if there was, if I had a second message, it would be to those very same people: don't listen to the committee called they.
mm.
Quite frankly, the committee called they don't matter.
No, that
The
I
committee
agree.
called they shouldn't have a voice.
Mm,
Um,
I
yeah,
agree. Because it's
and
the committee called they that help keep you small. So that's just that of what you've shared there is invaluable. So thank you so much. We really appreciate this conversation and what you've shared, and your words of wisdom and the value that you've brought, and what you're doing for the industry with helping to set it up with the long-term solutions and strategies as well with planning. So it's definitely very much needed, and I think it will definitely be something that, if people can grab that and run with it, how much better it's going to help with, the industry as a whole moving forward. So thank you for your insight and your wisdom, Craig. We really appreciate it.
Angela, it's been a great pleasure, and really, I wish you in your endeavours all the very best as well. I know for a fact that amongst my friends and network, that you are a great inspiration for them as well, and they really do appreciate, and hold you in high esteem
Oh,
for your efforts. And I hope that. Maybe perhaps just a minuscule amount of perhaps what I've shared today can help you in that message. And for your listeners, please invite them to reach out and say good
yeah.
day. And if there's anything that I've said that resonates, then I'd love to continue a conversation. I am quite passionate about trying to help people, and sometimes the hardest thing is just to identify people to reach out to. So more than welcome people to reach back.
Yeah, no, and we will definitely do that as well. So thank you so much, Craig. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure, anytime.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode today. I hope this conversation gave you something that you can take with you, whether it be a little bit of insight, inspiration, or maybe just a reminder that you're not alone. If it resonated with you, please share, because we're better when we help build each other up. And remember that your experience, your story, and your journey, it all matters more than you know. Until next time, stay kind, stay connected, and never forget, you are epic.